My name is Tam Hawkins, and we at the Great Austin Black Chamber of Commerce, thank you for joining us this afternoon for a conversation about equal pay for Black women. I'm hoping that more people become aware of the statistics of this day, and my thought and my deepest prayer is that we no longer need this day, because the landscape has become equal. We receive the same amount of pay for the work that we do, which is only equity, and it's only fair. What it means currently is that Black women must work 8 months into the new year before earning as much as their white male counterparts. So today we'll discuss the intention to encourage us to negotiate for more money in the workplace, and share with all of us the methods that have been used to do so successfully. And right now I'd like to thank Renata Estes Brown, who is part of GABC and runs our special projects. So she was the one instrumental in pulling this panel together and having you here. And I'd also like to thank our panelists and take this moment to introduce them. First, I'll begin with our moderator, Jewel Granberry. Jewel went to Prairie View A&M, where she received her bachelor's in marketing, as well as her master's in business. She is from Katy, Texas, but currently works here in Austin as a relationship liaison for VMware. Our other panelist is Sharon Brogdon. Sharon is the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion for Veracast, where she leads the effort to create and drive a strategic approach that enables DEI to be infused in all aspects of culture and business. Sharon holds a Bachelor of Science in Biology from Purdue University, is an ACENT Fellow with the Tuck School of Business, and a Cornell University Certified Diversity Professional and Advanced Practitioner. She's a veteran with the U.S. Navy and a mother to 2 adult children. She currently resides in Austin with her husband. And last, but certainly not least, is our second panelist and friend to our chamber, is Hope Green. Hope is the founder and creator of Emojis Grilled Cheese Bar and Food Truck in Austin. Along with her 28-year journey of entrepreneurship, this single mom has found success in the real estate industry, a retail store, and now in the world of food trucking. And I have to just add my own personal plug. Hope knows all things about food trucks and is just a wealth of knowledge. She attributes her business savvy to earning a bachelor's in sociology and an associate's degree in managerial accounting. So thank you, ladies, for joining us. I am so excited about this. We had hoped to have a bigger panel, and not bigger panel, but a bigger event in person, and really celebrate this day in a way that means that we're going to keep chipping away at that goal and task to eradicate the pay disparities. And so the intent for this panel is to reach across a wide spectrum of different places in your career. So Jewel, with that being said, I turn over the reins to you, and I'm going to turn off my video, and you ladies have a wonderful discussion.
Thank you, Tam, and I'm so excited to moderate and be here to talk about such an important issue, especially with the new social climate, with the pandemic. I know this is one of those topics that are definitely changing as we chat right now because of the D&I efforts all throughout companies and things like that. So in saying that, let's get right into it. The first question is, can you please, ladies, tell us about your role in the work you do to close the gap within the D&I space? Let's start with Hope.
All righty, just have to unmute myself. Hi, so I'm Hope Green. I'm the owner and founder of Emojis Grilled Cheese food truck here. One really big part that we do with our food truck business is we do work with homeless teens and youth that are aging out of the foster care system. So we teach job skills and life skills training to those youth and give them like real world work experience that they can take away and move on to bigger and better things if they choose, or if they'd like to go into an entrepreneurial entrepreneurial role of owning their own business, we help them with that process as well. Excuse me. So yeah, so a lot, we have lots of conversations. Most of the time, I deal with a lot of youth that are transitioning from whether they're going, how do I say? I'm still learning a lot of this stuff too, but they're in maybe gender transition. I think that, I don't know if that's the correct term. I'm still trying to, navigate all of that terminology. But those youth tend to find themselves displaced or outside the home of their both birth home. So they're a lot of times in foster care. And so in addition to working with at-risk youth or youth of color, Black teens, and that sort of thing, we're all, kind of navigating all this stuff together. And so we're often having conversations about systemic racism and how to, battle those ceilings that they come against, and how to have conversations, productive conversations, as they move, forward through those doors, as far as education, and how to get the things that they need, how to ask for them and be heard. So those are conversations that I'm having with these youth all the time, just coming up with coping mechanisms or tools, resources that they can use when they feel like maybe their voice is not being heard and they're getting left behind. So to be an advocate for themselves, to speak up and make sure that they get what they need and not wait for someone else to, open that door or find it for them, but, being able to go out and find those resources for themselves.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I really appreciate the service that you do for our community. And let's transition to Sharon. And yes, again, what is your role in the work you do to close the gap, the pay gap?
So thank you. And yes, I do also applaud you, Hope, for that's important work that you're doing, particularly for the youth that are aging out of the system and don't really have that fallback and advocacy. So that's such important work. And for me, being in kind of a corporate setting, one of the things that it affords for me is it enables a platform for me to be able to help to hold our organizations in check, if you will, from perspective of under the envelope of a D&I practitioner. I can come to the organization and say, have we done a pay equity study? And what has that revealed to us? I can push the organization to say, okay, so if we've done a pay equity study for women versus men, have we peeled back the next layer of that onion to say, okay, but when we look at women, are we looking at women as a whole, or are we looking at women with different ethnicities? Because we know that those different women have different experiences within the organization, a lot of that tied to that systemic racism that is so prevalent and top of mind for folks today. So that's where in the corporate setting, I have an opportunity to help to challenge that, but also opportunities like this and mentoring young women early in their careers and some mid-career still. It's an opportunity for me to, again, leverage the platform that I have to be able to share with them, to learn from my mistakes and what I didn't know as I was coming up, and to share with them what we're talking about today, just some tools of how they can help to navigate their careers.
Do you have any details around the, or a little further details around the pay equity study?
So yes. One of the things for organizations that are really striving to demonstrate their commitment to having an inclusive organization, one of the things often that they do, and particularly in the tech industry where I have spent most of my career, it really is a study looking across the organization that says, for all things being equal between men and women in the roles that they're in within the organization, and experience, are they being paid an equitable salary? And so a lot of times, again, particularly in the tech industry, you'll see a lot of companies that release their demographic information publicly, They also release information about if they have reached pay equity within the organization. So that's what that really is. It's an analysis of are they deliberately paying equitably across the organization for men and women.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Some good stuff. I could read that all day. Okay. So shifting gears, let's get into like, how do you feel your race and gender may have impacted you across your career? And we're going to ping pong back to Hope on that.
For sure. I was in corporate America for a while, trying to figure out, where I wanted to go, where I wanted to end up. And, it took a couple of tries, you get in that cycle where you're constantly switching jobs, and then you're thinking like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Why can't I keep a job, kind of a thing, until I learned that I was an entrepreneur. And so, once I came to that realization, like just the whole world shifted. And so, and I think a lot of times people think that you own your own business, so you kind of write your own check, which is true to, in a sense. But being a woman of color, you do kind of find yourself in those situations where you're not you're doing the same things, but you're not getting the same results as other people. And so I have found along the way to create relationships with folks that are where I want to go. And so through those types of relationships, I've been able to kind of navigate a little easier some of the just some of the journeys you have to go on to get to, where you want to go, whether it's like gaining contracts or just getting information sometimes has been difficult. It's like, there's all kinds of things going on, but then you're trying to figure out, well, how did all these people know to be here at this time or this date to get this information, but I didn't get the information. And so, just getting on those lists and getting in those rooms has been one of the probably the biggest biggest hurdles that I've tried to figure out, how to fix that and correct that. Just being a business owner and trying to make sure that our business is successful, so that our employees and our staff are successful. So as the owner, that's a huge burden that I deal with a lot, is because I have other people's families that are depending on the success of our company to feed their families. So making sure that we're in position, and just you have to ask the tough questions. So you kind of have to and I never like to play the race card. I always try to let that be the last card in the deck. But when you're having a conversation and all logic has left the room, it's like there's nothing else left to talk about. So it's like, well, I've tried all these things, I've done all the steps, I've checked all the boxes, and yet here we still are. And so you have to kind of push past your comfort zone and ask those tough questions and have that conversation. It's becoming easier with the Black Lives Matter and the support Black business conversations that are happening right now. But over my 25 years of being an entrepreneur, those have been tough discussions to have, because everybody wants to not face the fact that racism still exists. So nobody wants to have that conversation, because once you do, you have to kind of recognize your part in keeping that alive. And so working with a lot of folks that don't look like us, they're the ones they're the gatekeepers. And so you still have to go through that gate. And so getting there is one part of the battle. And then once you're there, how do you stay there? How do you actually, open the door and feel welcome, create a place for yourself? So it's about having those tough conversations, even when it's, it doesn't feel comfortable.
Yeah, I definitely second that. I noticed, especially being a Black woman, it is becoming easier. However, at the very beginning of my career, even before I even made it to, my job or career now, I was like, hey, you have to continuously have those hard questions and push yourself. So that's like a very great, perspective. How about you, Sharon? How do you feel your race and gender may have impacted you across your career?
I think it's a part of, it's been a part of, it's had an impact since day one. And as I think about, you know, even my time in the military, for as long as I can remember, probably 9 out of 10 times, I've been the only Black woman in the room.
Yeah.
You know, and the interesting thing about that is what I found in corporate America, as well as a lot of the folks that were entering corporate America, and it surprises me that it is still the case in many instances. Those folks, including myself, were the first generation in their family to work in corporate America. So we did not have benefit of having those dinner time conversations where dad was talking about, you know, okay, he's having this kind of issue with the boss and how's he going to handle it. Didn't have benefit of being able to reach back to the parents and saying, okay, I don't know what's going on. What do I need to do? So one of the things that, as a result of that, the folks that are coming out, they're all brilliant. The talent is brilliant, and that's why they're getting hired at these great companies. But when you don't have access to information around how to navigate the organization, to your point, Hope, how come everybody else got the memo, but you didn't get the memo of how to be in the room and when to be in the room? The same thing holds true. If you don't know what are the norms of navigating the organization, you'll figure it out because you're brilliant. But sometimes you'll fall and skin your knee and have to figure it out the hard way, rather than having someone come over and say, you know what, hey, Jewel, let me show you how work gets done around here. This is the stuff that it's not in any books, it's not written down in anywhere, but when you're not the only one in the room, you're more likely to have access to that information, and that makes all the difference. So when that manager is trying to decide, you know, do I give this stretch opportunity that has lots of great visibility and put somebody on the fast track, but my reputation's on the line? Do I give it to Sharon and she gets it eventually? Or do I give it to my guy, Joe? Because Joe's my guy. We went to the same school. We've had all the same experiences. He gets it right away. And, you know, all of a sudden Joe's on fast track. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, what's wrong with me? How come I don't get it? How come I don't get those opportunities? How come I'm not catching on like everybody else does? I'm smart. I know I would. And you start to believe that self-talk that says you aren't as good. Even though you're working twice as hard, oftentimes you have more credentials behind your name, but you start to have that experience and it can mess with your mind. So when I think about how race has impacted me, it has been a part of everything I've done for as long as I can remember in corporate America.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And just a little insert there. What was it, working at VMware right now? At the top of 2018, before all of the Black women scattered out of the office, we would actually come into the room 3 times a quarter, and 4 things would happen. We would gossip about what's going on in the company. Then we would promote each other behind closed doors and tell people what's going on there. To your point, Hope, I am definitely entrepreneurial spirit, so was 2 other girls in the group. So we've been bouncing ideas off of each other to help that progression after corporate. And then the last thing was just to be able to have a space to actually be seen and heard, because the biggest thing that I see in corporate space is that there's gaps of caring for Black women who are not heard and seen when they're the only ones on that team, because Black men kind of run a little bit different. And it does become an uphill battle whenever you're not being understood. And I embrace aggressive because I'm aggressive, okay? So, okay, so in saying that, we are in a unique time in history in which we are dealing with a pandemic as well as a continued fight for social justice. That may discourage citizens from asking for more of their employers. What would you say about advocating for oneself in the workspace at this time? And I want to ask Sharon that question first, and then we're going to swing back around to Hope.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely unique times. And what I would say, on the one hand, it is I believe, a window of opportunity for people of color right now. And I will say that because of the fact that companies are, especially those companies that have been caught on their back foot a little bit, if you will, during the Black Lives Matter, or as a result, excuse me, of the Black Lives Matter elevation, in that they're a little bit more sensitive to making sure they show up properly. I'll say it like that. And so I think because of that, so long as you have a strong track record, I think it's okay to push. I think, and perhaps push more than perhaps you might have in the past, because people will take notice of you in perhaps ways that they may not have in the past, because now they're kind of doing that self-reflection to say, wow, are we really racist? You know, are we really supporting racism? We don't want to be in that camp, right? And I say use that to your advantage. I also say be smart. You know, if the company is laying people off, you know, kind of weigh your bets there to make sure you don't put yourself in jeopardy. But I still say it's a great opportunity to push and enable the companies the opportunity to demonstrate their commitment. Lots of statements have been put out that say companies are supportive of anti-racism. And so this is an opportunity where they can kind of put their money where their mouth is and say, okay, I'm somebody in your organization that had this track record of this, and I should be paid, or I should expect this level of compensation for my work.
Good point. And just to kind of further that question, Sharon, I wanted to know also, what is your idea around the ERGs to support employees being mistreated as well? Because I see that there's a lot of troping for, you know, we're Black in your company and we want to show you that we're Black, but then there's actual employees that are a part of these ERGs, whether it's the Black Latino space, but they're not being handled right until they're probably fired or go to another team, that's a long process either way it goes.
So I would say from perspective of ERGs, I'm getting a little bit of an echo. Are you hearing that on your end or no? No?
I'm gonna mute.
I would just say from perspective of ERGs, they're a great resource to get that support and get that backing. It kind of depends on how they have been positioned within the company. If they're positioned within the company as a really solid organization and have a lot of support from the company, absolutely leverage that. Stay connected with each other, because they are also a strong opportunity for you to have just that moral support behind you when you know you've been treated unfairly. I would say, though, the ones that have the power to make a difference, and that's where it really comes into play, is who has the decision-making authority and the power to act on instances of mistreatment. And it's not, that kind of power is typically not granted to your ERGs. So that's when you have to have either a senior executive as your advocate, or go to your HR. I know when people say HR, they're like, oh, no, HR, that's the dark hole or whatever, dark side, right? But you know what? Companies have to be held accountable. And the way that you hold them accountable, if there is a level of discrimination that's happening, is to go to your HR organization, get things documented, give them the opportunity to make a difference. And if they don't, and you put everything on the table and you really feel that you have a case, that's when you can take action outside of the company from a legal perspective. But you've got to have it documented and have given the company an opportunity to respond.
Thank you for that. And what are your thoughts as well, Hope, on this topic?
I'm sorry, would you mind repeating the original question? I just want to make sure I touch all the bases.
Yeah, it's long-winded. I got you. Okay, so we are in a unique time in history in which we are dealing with a pandemic as well as a continued fight for social justice. I don't know why I'm butchering social. that may discourage citizens from asking for more of their employees. So in saying that, what would you say about advocating for oneself in the workplace at this time?
You know, my message, sometimes I think it can get a little controversial, but I'm a really big proponent of allies and creating allied relationships. You know, when I had a real estate company for 16 years, and we built one of the first mobile notary agencies back when they first started, when that whole process first came out. I went and I purposefully chose a white man to be my mentor, because they were the ones that occupied the space that I wanted to be in. And so they were already filling that role. So I felt it necessary to, you know, talk to somebody who walks that walk, you know, to try to figure out, you know, just kind of pick their brain and see, you know, what are some of the conversations they're having, what things are they doing, you know, to move forward, and then try to navigate my way into that realm. And so who better than somebody who's actually been in the room for a while than, you know, another white man. So I found the you know, the perfect fit for me, that we had a good relationship, and I could be very open and honest, and you know, just say, well, here's the issues or the struggles that I've had, you know, and I think it's because of this and that. And so, and he was very, you know, willing to share, you know, what he thought, you know, was a good pathway for me to take, you know, into, you know, where I wanted to go. And I think that that's very necessary today, is creating those types of relationships, mainly because I don't really think it should be our responsibility or the responsibility of Black America to dismantle systemic racism. We didn't create it, and so we shouldn't, you know, it shouldn't be our burden to have to figure out, you know, how to make the rest of the world comfortable with it, or how to fix it and all of that. And I don't think we can, because, you know, a lot of the tenants, you know, that, you know, keep that system going, we don't have control over them. They don't lie with us. So we need to go to the source, you know, and try to figure that out. And I think, you know, being partners in that fight, or being partners in that instance, is better, you know, for all of us, you know, to learn from each other, to help each other along the way, and, you know, fix what's wrong and get an understanding and educate, you know. And if we don't talk to each other, how can we learn, you know, what the other side is thinking or what the other side's doing if we're not communicating with one another? So I think creating allyships and relationships with individuals who don't look like us is a good way to kind of move that needle forward, and to create, you know, change, and create an environment that we all can strive in, that we all can be successful in, which is the ultimate goal. Is we all just want our equal share. I mean, we don't want more than anyone else. We just want the opportunity to be able to do the things that make us happy, the things that we want to be able to do without obstacles. So that's, you know, really all we're asking for. And so, you know, just equaling out those types of relationships that can help get us there, I think is, you know, one of the more effective tools that we can use.
So, and just in quick, I was wondering if you had 2 or 3 ways of how you strategize to build an internal and external advocacy.
Sure.
I know that you're in the space outside of corporate, and Sharon is inside of corporate. So, I mean, there's definitely both places that you need in order to feel supported as you navigate through either space.
Yeah. And sometimes it's even good if you're, you know, working in a particular company setting, or an environment or an industry, to even create a partnership or a relationship outside of that realm. Maybe not necessarily a mentor that you see every day or that you work with every day, but somebody that is removed from your regular environment may be, you know, beneficial, so that you can kind of talk more openly without feeling like you're going to give something away, or, you know, that type of thing. If there's too much overlap with other relationships that may, you know, kind of cloud that. But one thing I would definitely look into is when, you know, trying to navigate these relationships is consider, you know, like the individuals that you're you're inviting into your personal space, which is basically what that is. You know, you're making an introduction, you know, inviting someone into your space, is you want to really look at who they're around, like who do they, where do they invest their most of their time, invest most of their finances, because that will tell you like where their heart is, you know, like what they're really into or what motivates them, and making sure that, you know, you're both kind of in sync with those types of things. Like, do you have the same interests in the world? And then also asking, you know, just like what's their goals, you know, in the future, like what they want the future to look like, or what they want to have their world look like. Because of course, you know, you definitely want somebody in your corner that is a true advocate, that's authentic about being in partnership with you to help, you know, advance your position in life, you know, not just necessarily in the company or the organization, but just to help you, you know, that has a real, true, authentic interest in making sure that, you know, you're successful, you know, whether it's at the workplace or even if, you know, outside of that, you know, they really want to see you successful. And not just because sometimes like right now, all the buzzwords and everything, you know, people, it's a fad to be an ally, it's a fad to be, you know, pro-Black or support Black this and support Black that. So a lot of people are kind of glamming onto those things. And so just to kind of do a little extra research, ask a few extra questions just to make sure that they have an authentic desire to be an ally, and not just, you know, it's the cool thing to do. So, you know, just have a deeper conversation just to see where their heart is really positioned.
Thank you for that. And what I was hearing is ally and advocacy is something that has an underlying purpose of network. So networking with a purpose actually gets you to where you should be going. And that's very huge on equal pay, because if you're trying to figure out
Yep.
how to get that, that great, you know, that great space of, I guess, equity in the
And if you're
workspace,
able to create
you have to know.
yeah, and if you're able to create a relationship with somebody that's already in the room and they can open the door for you, then by all means, that's exactly the goal. You know, it is to create relationships with people that are places that you want to be, but haven't found the opportunity to get there. And if they can, you know, help you get there, that's exactly what an ally should do. And one quick example that I just love this example, it happened the other day, but there was a White House press conference going on, and I'm sorry I don't know the Black reporter's name, but the young lady, she has a short curly afro, and she's always kind of at odds with those guys at the podium, and they don't call on her. And so one day they called on the white reporter sitting in front of her. And so when she went to ask her questions, she's like, "Oh, but didn't you have a question?" And she turns to the Black reporter. And so then the Black reporter got to ask her question because the folks at the podium were deliberately not calling on her. And so that's basically what a white ally does, is they use their position to open a door for us, because we have deliberately been left out of the conversations.
Good deal. Thank you for that. So Sharon, I was wondering, as a Black woman, whether you're early on in your career or not, how would you approach a company that you're inquiring about to see if that company is very fair in their practices of pay?
It's a great question. And so what I would suggest is, again, do your homework and look at how the company positions themselves on social media. Look at some of the what's the word that I'm looking for? Look at some of the ratings, the feedback that folks have given about the company and how they pay and treat their employees. I think if you're in the process of interviewing, it's also important to know your own worth and your value. And so if you have a certain level of skill and experience, there are websites that you can go to that help you to understand what should you be paid in that particular region. and in that particular area of expertise. And then that gives you something to compare with. It's interesting, one of my, I call her my professional godmother. She's been one of my mentors and sponsors throughout my career. And one of the things that she said to me just recently, whatever they're offering you or whatever they put out there, double it. And so that might be a little extreme, but it's to understand that they're always going to lowball you, and that's just business. They're going to do that. They may lowball us a little bit more because we're Black. I don't know. I don't have insight to that side of how that works, but they will always lowball because they want to have room for negotiation. And the real conversation is that men, and white men in particular, always negotiate. And I think for us, so here was my experience that I'll share with my first corporate job from the military. I was just so excited to have a job and to get the offer that I'm like, oh my God, whatever they're going to pay me, I'm going to take it because I got a job, right? But then, you know, because I did not negotiate my salary, I started out way below the power curve and way below where I should have been based on my experience. And it took me decades to make that up. And oftentimes we don't make it up because the increases are incremental. And you have to leave the company. I had to leave the company and come back in order to be able to do it right the second time around. So I would say very much so, do your homework about the company. What kind of reputation do they have from a pay perspective and perspective of culture and how they treat their employees? Do they have people of color at the company? And if they don't, is that somewhere where you want to be? And you get to choose. At the end of the day, you get to choose. But then also understand your own value and what you're worth. And I would say, going back to Hope's point, which I think is so critical about having a voice that you can go to say, you know, here's what they're offering. Is this right? And oftentimes, if you can have that feedback from someone who doesn't look like you, who is in the room and knows what that kind of role should be paid for, or how that role should be compensated, that's critical insight. And this same godmother of mine, as she was leaving the company, she reached out to white male counterpart, said, how much should I ask for? And he told her. And that usually only happens when you have authentic relationships and you've built those relationships where there's trust. And so again, having mentors and sponsors and allies who don't look like you is critical, because they're in the room having those conversations. They're at the bar, on the golf course, wherever those conversations are being had, and they know how those things are negotiated.
Good point. And just to go into the topic that, well, I'm going to make it a topic now, but the word you used, which was choice, we kind of used it quite a bit. I want to ask you another question real quick. We hear a lot about negotiation more than ever right now, and there's a lot of things on YouTube, social media, all that good stuff. But alongside of that, we hear a lot of millennials at their jobs sharing how much they make within their salary. I do it. Okay, anyway, I'm back. So, in saying that, when you find out that you're like the lowest person being paid on a team, right? And you feel some type of way, and they have the ability to give you the salary that they need. There's no freeze and all that. They're just not giving you what you need. Should you leave the company?
I would say that, so I have to laugh when you say you do it, because I'll let you all in on a secret. It's the bane of the existence of the HR folks that millennials tend to share their salaries, because it causes them to need to be more transparent and honest. So yeah. HR hates it, but the fact that you do it, it gives you insight into where you are. And so I think that it is, before you leave the company, I would say bring it to their attention. Here's what I've learned, and help me understand. It doesn't have to be confrontational, but just help me understand why my salary, I bet you have more experience, or you've got more successes under your belt because you've had to work twice as hard all along the way to get to the same place. So come in with your facts. This is what I've done. This is my track record. And yet I understand that I make $10,000 less per year than my guy Steve or your guy Steve over here. So help me understand why that's so. And force them to have that conversation with you. Now, I took my HR hat off when I said that, right?
Thank you for that. Something that's happening in 2020.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you the same question about like negotiation, because I know that you left the space, I wanted to ask more so of like, would you, if you leave, what would that next step look like? When is the appropriate time to make that pivot? And what should the expectations be around that? So basically, what is the headspace people should look out for whenever they make those decisions?
As far as moving into being an entrepreneur as opposed to being an employee?
Transitioning from corporate to possible entrepreneur or corporate to another corporate space.
Corporate.
What's the safest way about going into that transition?
Well, I would, like your mom, your auntie always used to tell you, don't leave one job if you don't have another job. So
yeah,
that would be rule number one. So for me, what it actually looked like, I was, I had a degree in accounting, and so I'm, at my office doing my accounting work, and I started doing the real estate stuff like on the weekends. And then I would start getting phone calls while I was at work, like, come do this, and I had to keep turning them down because, I had to be at my 9-to-5 job. And so then one day I get out a little sheet of paper and I start making tick marks for every time I turned down an outside job. And so when those jobs started to surpass my salary that I was making at my 9-to-5 job, I, had a conversation and, wanted to see what other options I had as far as the company, as far as growth and where this was going to take me, where I was going to end up. And, I put all that stuff out on the table for them to help me make that decision. And so the feedback that I got from them was not favorable. And so I was like, well, it just made more sense for me to make that transition. And so you can do that same thing, because even when I, mentor the youth that I work with, I don't always like tell everybody, oh, you need to have your own business, you need to be an entrepreneur. That's not always, that's not for everybody. It's not for the faint of heart at all. So, I give those options, of course, and, and then as we're working, the kids are asking me questions because, they're watching me do what I do every day, all day long. And so, if you go with an entrepreneurial mindset, like as you yourself profess at the beginning of the conversation, when you have an entrepreneurial mindset, you're so much of an asset to whatever other company that you go to when you bring that with you. And so those views and the way that you look at your job makes you just a more, a better team member for whatever company you're at. So even if you transition from one company to a new company, still ask those same questions, like do your charting or your mapping and look at, what am I getting here and where can I go? What options is this company offering me? And then look at the conversations that maybe you've had with the other company that you're considering and weigh them out, and I think a lot of times writing stuff down and being able to take a step back and actually look at it, get it out of your head and what you think it might look like, but actually write those things down. Ask, viable people, like people who know at the other company, trusted folks, trusted voices, ask those folks, to answer those questions for you and make a list. And then just compare those lists and see, which is going to offer the best thing for your future as well as your present. And then that will help you make that choice. But when you feel the pull, your gut tells you it's time to go, I wouldn't ignore that. That's the only thing that, that's the biggest thing is when you're inside, when your heart is telling you that there needs to be a shift, I would listen to yourself.
Oh, don't say that, because I feel this shit, but I was like, I'm getting paid with some good benefits. Lord, okay. Give me some time. All right, it's time for Q&A.
So I'd like to say thank you, ladies. We are at the Q&A portion. This was so good, and I know that we all could have listened to you forever, but I did want to get the audience some time to do Q&A. I do have one question off the top, and so this is also to the audience. If you have a question, if you'd like to place it in the chat, we'll make certain to get to your question. But Antonia White has said her question, whoa, that was fast. Her question moved. And so she wanted to ask, should the conversation around helping you understand pay differential take place initially with HR, or should that happen with your direct manager first? How should you handle it, and what are the steps should you take it through a food chain?
So I could start with that. And I would say always be respectful of the relationship with your manager, and start there. And document everything. And a nice way to document is to follow up with the conversation with your manager and say, thank you so much for the conversation, just to make sure that I'm clear on what we talked about, and then recap everything and allow them to respond. And say, did I miss anything? And then you've got now a written record of that conversation. And if it's not if it is still not satisfying to you, then I would go to HR. But again, you always want to give the organization an opportunity to respond.
And Sharon, I've always blind copied myself on that email as well. So
Yes.
To my personal email address for clarification. Are there any questions, any other questions that you'd like to ask of our great panelists?
I also wanted to say, find a friend in HR, because sometimes they have a little bit of access that they can be able to help you navigate who to talk to about what and what funds are available as well. Definitely going through that with one of my friends. So that was the best thing that helped her get what she deserved.
I have a question for you ladies. Everyone has said this has been great, and I think so too. And you're in different spaces, but what, I think a lot has been made, and I think you did touch on it, but I think oftentimes we just don't know how to ask and advocate for ourselves. And I think that's been this kind of struggle. My grandmother, who I love saying this, had a 6th grade education, was probably one of the smartest people that I knew, but she taught me early on that you always ask for more money. And right now it's escaping me how she taught me, but it was this old colloquialism. It's like, if they give you $5, you ask for 7. And she just always taught me to be in the habit of always asking for more. And then Hope, there was something that you said earlier. A lot of my mentors didn't always look like me. Oftentimes they were white men. And then I've had some incredible Black female mentors too. So I've had mentors across the spectrum, and some white females as well. But they taught me how to negotiate my salary. How early, and Sharon, this is a question I think might hit home for you and Hope as well. How do you teach, what do you teach your daughters about their value in terms of money? And Jewel, add your 2 cents in. I didn't want to exclude you from this question.
I think one thing that has been like a running theme with me and my daughter when we talk is investigate. That is always, like, all the way through junior high and high school. It just boiled down to that one word, because she would come home with these issues and these problems that were just so huge. And I'm like, well, what did they actually say? And what questions did you actually ask? Like, what words did you actually, because I always wanted to give her the ability to go advocate for herself. I never wanted to step in and do it for her, but I wanted her to know that I have your back, but I want you to go have this conversation. So I would ask her, specifically, what did y'all say? What were the words that were used? And what questions did you ask? And I think that's that to me, for communication purposes, is always key, is to ask questions. I think a lot of times we go into different situations with our own biases, or just what we already know is going to be the outcome. And so we don't take the time to ask more questions. So I think asking more questions can definitely help to alleviate a lot of the fallout, you know, from different things. And that's basically what I've always want, you know, never be afraid. Even if you think you already know the answer, just always ask questions, because you've got to dig a little deeper, because it's probably the answer you get will probably surprise you more often than not.
So I have to, you make me laugh with that, Hope, because I know what my fallback with my daughter. Okay, do you want me to have to go in there? Don't make me go in there. So she knows, you know, that's always the fallback. But it hasn't, fortunately, it has not gotten to that. But I applaud exactly what you're saying. It's just to, and my daughter's on the line and she just said, yep, it's true. That's what Mom says. But it's also so important, I believe, and this is what I tell both of my children, go in with your eyes wide open. And you have to ask those questions and really understand what is the current state of what you're trying to navigate through. To your point, don't base it on presumptions. Ask those questions so you really understand what is it that is the hurdle I'm trying to overcome. And that comes with asking those questions. But that's my piece, is always go in with your eyes wide open.
And I'm one of the people that came into corporate, one of the first within my family to be in a corporate space like this. Everyone else is pretty much an entrepreneur, and then they have their secrets. So yeah, I just had to get thrown in there. So what I learned for myself, not just by myself, but by watching, is people come in prepared with a case of validity in the, that helps. And then I come from a household that always said, no, you can't go to her house. No, you can't go here. So I'm crazy enough to ask anyway. You know what I mean? Because you never know, that might be the day that she just was feeling good and said yes. Yeah. So just expect the no and ask anyway. And that was the thing that got me in a lot of doors, because I was just like, do y'all have an extra ticket to go to that? They're like, yeah, we do. I was like, well, shoot, here I come. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, ladies, again. And I wanted to just remind the audience to, if they get a moment, please fill out the survey so we can continue to craft our programs better. But we did have one question specifically for Hope. And it is, Hope, how do you best advocate for yourself as a Black woman in the entrepreneurial space? And what they wanted to know in terms of getting contracts, and how do you basically fight for your money? And the reason why I use the word fight, because that is what a lot of times it feels like, at least for me, is that you have to justify your value again.
Yeah, and it's frustrating. I must say, I don't have the golden ticket to that one just yet. But basically, I think, I mean, for lack of a better explanation, just being the squeaky wheel. I mean, I know a lot of people through the city of Austin, and it just, I guess through my own frustration, like when I see things, like I know exactly what I want, and then when I see somebody else get it, then I'm trying to figure out, well, my business is registered, I'm on every list that I could possibly think of to be on, and then there's still stuff that's slipping through that, that I'm not seeing, and I don't understand why that is. So a lot of times what I'll find is, when I ask a question, I get a lot of gatekeeper type responses, like, oh, the budget wasn't big enough, or the budget switched, or we've got this new person in a role, or, these really kind of throwaway answers that don't really speak to the question that was asked. So I ask it again in a different way, or I'll find 2 or 3 other people and I'll ask the same question. Persistence, I guess I would say, would probably be the way that, we then, and now, I guess what has started happening is, because I have continued to push for those things and ask those questions, and now people know me and they know what I want, they know what I'm looking for, because I've put it out there. Like, if here's where I'm trying to go, you know, very specifically, you know, like we want to have when a big business comes to Austin, we want to be their cafeteria inside their building. If they're going to have a cafeteria, can we rent that space and be the cafeteria for their 2,000 employees that are going to be occupying that? Because there's never like a bid that goes out. There's no formal, you know, whatever on some publication that all of Austin has access to. So how are the people that get those contracts, how are they being notified that that's available? And so and that's a very specific ask. And so I keep asking that question over and over again. And it wasn't until, and I don't know if this has anything to do with support Black businesses, but it wasn't until very recent that people have started putting my name on emails that I wasn't being put on those emails before. And so I'm seeing information that I wasn't seeing before, but for 9 years, I have been asking those same questions and not getting, you know, a qualified answer. So persistence is really all I can say, is just being willing to, because I think too, sometimes it'd be like, oh, I've already asked them twice and I'm not gonna ask them again. No, you ask them 22 times, or until somebody actually gives you, like I said, when all logic leaves the conversation, what else is left? You know, so it's like the responses I'm getting aren't matching up with what I'm seeing. So I need a better response. And so I'll keep asking until I get a response that actually makes sense with, you know, what we're actually seeing.
Okay, we've got about 2 minutes. I just want to make certain and give, are there any other questions before you let all this knowledge just slip through your hands? Themselves. And I have to say this, is that no matter where you lie politically, I am super excited. I feel like it is just the bow for Kamala Harris to be on a ticket. You guys, I'm just peacock proud and excited about the possibilities. And where my children look at it and they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, okay. I love that they have no idea, but we are excited in this house, this part of me. Thank you, ladies. Renata, am I missing any questions? The feedback has been tremendous. And I'm so grateful to each of you and all of the work that you do professionally and in your private sector. I know how each of you gives back. So thank you, ladies. We have a minute to spare and we're on time. So I'm always happy to end a program on time.
Thanks so much for having us.
Oh, wonderful. Take care.
Mm-hmm.